You are listening to episode number 76 of the Everything Ham Radio podcast. Today we're going to be talking about software-defined radios with Ria Jairam, November 2 Romeo Juliet. So stay tuned. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Everything Ham Radio podcast. This is episode number 76, and today we're going to be talking with Ria Jairam, November 2 Romeo Juliet, about software-defined radios. You can find all of the information we're going to be talking about, as well as all the links and additional information in the show notes you can find at everythinghamradio.com/podcast/76. That's the number 76. You can follow me on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/everythinghamradio, or on the page at facebook.com/everythinghamradio. I'm on YouTube at youtube.com/everythinghamradio, and on Twitter at K5CLM. So, before we get started, I hope everybody had an awesome 4th of July. I know I did. We had some friends and family over. We had some hot dogs. We watched a whole bunch of fireworks. And my kids just had a blast. So I hope that y'all's 4th of July was as awesome as mine was. Now, there was this topic. I had absolutely no idea what I was talking about. It's an awesome, what's the word I'm looking for? An awesome topic. A lot of information to be brought in and talked about, and we talked quite a bit about it and got a lot of really interesting information about it. So I hope that you enjoy it as much as I did, and I hope that you learn something from it. I not only did I learn stuff about software-defined radio, but I also learned stuff about just HF in general, and antennas and stuff like that. So I hope that you enjoy it as much as I do. So I guess let's go ahead and get started with the interview with Ria, and we'll go from there. Hey everybody, we are here today with Ria Jairam, November 2 Romeo Juliet, and we are going to be talking today about software-defined radios. So, Ria, before we get started, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit, tell us how you got into the hobby and some of the things that you like to do.
Well, hello. My name is Ria, as mentioned, and I got into the hobby. My dad was a shortwave listener when I was 4 years old or so, and he began tuning around the radios, and I heard all these strange, wonderful signals from the UK and the United States. I should mention that I'm originally from Trinidad and Tobago, which is in the Caribbean. And we had all these nice shortwave signals, and then my dad had a little interest in electronics, but I somehow got a little more. Fast forward to secondary school, which is, I guess in America they call it high school or junior high. I did meet up with a school teacher, Tony, 9Y4AL, and he introduced me to ham radio. And after a few years of that, I think after I graduated, I got my license at 17 in the late 90s, so I'm giving away my age now. And I migrated to the States at the end of the 90s in the year 2000. I think the very last day of the year 2000. And I got involved in wonderful people. I met Steve, W2ML, who's now a Silent Key, and he introduced me to DXing. And then more recently, I met up with Gerald, K5SDR, but I'd also purchased a Flex radio in 2016 as part of a station improvement project here. But before that, I've actually been experimenting with various homebrew SDR devices. So this is basically, I'm a very, I hate to use the word geeky, but I like to dabble in tech.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with geeky.
Well, so I've heard.
The geeky is the new cool.
That's right.
Or at least that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So you've basically been in the hobby just about as long as I have. I got my license in '95, I think, when I was 15. So you've been
Yeah.
about as long as I have. What kind of stuff do you like to do?
Oh, well, I love, so I tell people my interests change, but mostly my interests center around contests. They center around DX. I also do rag chews at night on 40 and 80 meters with a group, G0 EVY and company. And, but I'm also getting into DMR and stuff now. I just got a Shark RF open spot and a TYT DMR MD380 and, playing with that stuff. So I also do, professionally, I also do system administration and software development at a large media company in New York. So, that kind of ties into the hobby too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know. If you can't change with your interest in this hobby and you can't find something to do in this hobby, then there's something wrong, because there's all aspects of this hobby that you can do and not be bored. I mean, if you're bored with one thing, you can always go to something else. I mean, I've gone from just basic mobile use when I'm to and from work to contesting and field day and emergency communications, and then I kind of got away from it for a little bit when my wife and I became foster parents, and I had to take down my shack, and then I started a blog 2.5 years ago, and then a podcast 1.5 years ago, and this is where I'm taking my aspect of the hobby, learning and helping y'all learn all these different things, and bringing people in here like Ria to teach us about something that I have absolutely nothing about. I mean, it's software-defined radio. Okay, yeah, I can figure that out. Okay, it's like it's software and it tells it the stuff where to go, but it's still like way out in left field for me. So that is why I brought Ria on here to tell y'all about what software-defined radio is. So with that being said, what exactly is software-defined radio?
Okay, so let's start with, let's first of all step back a bit and say, what is radio? So radio basically deals with alternating currents. And alternating currents are basically mathematical things. So in essence, you've known radios to have components like diodes and transistors and other physical components, inductors, capacitors, and such, to do all the functions of detection, signal detection, filtering, and all of that stuff. What software does is software-defined radio puts that in software. So in order to do that, you have to first digitize the signals. So what you do is you can use an analog to digital converter and convert the RF signals into numbers, and then the software, which is a software-defined radio. You'll hear a lot of software-defined radio experts saying that the software is the radio. So what happens is the software now would actually process those numbers and then come back out with a usable audio or demodulated product, like whether it's a digital signal, for example, like a JT65 or something like that. And it could end up being, it's then converted to an analog signal to be played back on your speakers or your headphones. And for transmission, it's basically the reverse. So you take an analog signal, digitize it, and then convert it to an RF signal. So basically, I hate to call it this, but it's basically just like a giant computer processing the RF. And throughout the evolution of software-defined radio, you've seen the digitization happen at different stages. So that's what it is in a nutshell.
Okay. Well, I guess basically it's kind of like the next step of things like maybe a TNC type thing where it transfers the audio signal to a digital signal, and then maybe?
Not really.
No? Okay.
So how should I put it? We're talking over a computer here, and then the computer takes the signal from the microphone and then converts it into digital data and sends it over the internet, right?
Right.
Now, with the software-defined radio, it has an analog to digital converter, which is basically a device that takes the RF signals and turns them into numbers. and then those numbers are inside of the radio or inside of a computer, because there are different types of radios. So let's say it's processed by a piece of computer hardware. And then after that, you apply filters. Now filters, you know of as coils and capacitors, inductors and capacitors and stuff, right?
Right.
And crystals.
Mm-hmm.
Well, those things are actually mathematical in nature, meaning that those things are actually math. So you can take those things, you can represent those in math, and then you can put that math in a computer program. And then in that computer program, you can then do the same thing as you would do with a filter, all in digital, without having any analog effects at all. You can do it all without noise. You can do it without, without having to deal with signal levels, analog signal levels, and all that stuff. So, that's where it gets. That's like the main advantage of it.
So you mentioned JT65. I was under the impression that JT65 was more, basically just like another form of, setting up your wire and stuff like that. Is it actually using software-defined radios for it?
So that's interesting. JT65 is actually a digital mode, and it's digital modulation. It's not really software-defined radio, but I'm just saying that in my software-defined radio setup, right? So normally, do you operate JT65 at all?
Not yet. That's one of the things that I'm highly looking into, though.
Okay. So basically, it's a weak signal mode, right? Uh-huh. Where Joe Taylor, who is a brilliant, Nobel laureate, and I'm telling you, the guy is really brilliant. He developed this mode to deal with really, really weak signals, and basically, it's a series of tones. It sounds like an ice cream truck, and that's exactly what it sounds like. It's the musical mode. And it normally you would use a sound card interface, right? The same thing we talk about, where you take the signal from the microphone and put it in the computer. Mm-hmm. Well, you have a sound card interface, and the sound card interface would then take these tones, send it into the computer, and the WSJTX software would then process these tones and then produce usable data out of them, such as call signs and signal reports and things like that. Now, why I had mentioned JT65 earlier is because with a software-defined radio, in my setup, I use a Flex 6700, but you can do this with a lot of other software-defined radios. Instead of having a sound card device, the radio actually outputs digital data into the computer, and the computer software then takes that data stream digitally and processes it. What this means is that that sound card cable you have going from your radio to your computer, it can get noise in it from any different things, from AC hum, or maybe even your transmitted signal or anything, just noise in the environment. With digital, not so. It's just bits, and the bits aren't really susceptible to analog noise at all. So I hear a lot of things, and I see a lot of digital signals that like minus 22 and minus 26 dB, which is lower than what a lot of people see on analog radios. So yeah, wow. Just because the noise is not there.
Huh. That's awesome. So yeah. Let's before we take a break, let's talk a little bit about the history of SDRs. That is maybe as far as you know. How did a software-defined radio come about? Do you know?
Well, the history is a bit sketchy. I mean, software-defined radio, I would say it has a lot of tie-ins to the field of digital signal processing, which is essentially what it is. There were various defense, to put it in a nutshell, there were various defense research projects that, they wanted to hear. I mean, this is how a lot of technology is born, right? They want to basically find better ways to, fight wars and gain intelligence. Well, software-defined radio pretty much was started as defense-related projects. I believe DARPA or some other military research organization started initial research, and other commercial companies as well. In amateur radio, there are several people who got into software-defined radio. One of them is Gerald Youngblood. Now, Gerald is the president and owner of Flex Radio Systems. He published an article called "A Software-Defined Radio for the Masses," and it was basically most people's introduction to the technology of software-defined radio in amateur radio, because this was like the first, in-depth paper I've seen, at least, on amateur radio. And this was back in 2002 in QEX. And it basically detailed, what eventually became the Flex series of radios before the new Signature series. And this was basically like a sound card interface type of radio. So then eventually things evolved. There were various open source and homebrew projects, and those gradually, it became really interesting. Then you had the OpenHPSDR project was one of them, and that eventually evolved into what people know as the Anon, Apache Labs Anon transceivers. A lot of people don't know that they're actually an open source project, and Anon, makes the hardware for it. And another one, of course, is the Flex Radio Signature series, and that actually, that was developed after Flex Radio. I believe they took on a commercial project, or might have been a government project, and then, branched off into something for the amateur world from that. So.
All right, well, that sounds like a perfect time to take a break real fast. When we come back, we're going to continue our discussion. We're going to talk about how we can take some of these SDRs and use them in amateur radio, and some of the different types, like the Flex and the Anon, like Ria's been talking about. So stick around. We'll be right back. Do you have an old-fashioned voltage or amp meter hooked to your station? Are you looking to find something that has more bells and whistles? Check out the West Mountain Radio Power Check. The Power Check has 8 display modes, including voltage, current flow in either direction, wattage, and amp hours, and will measure from 0 to 60 volts with 40 amps continuous load. It is accurate to within 10 millivolts and 10 milliamps. It has a backlit graphics LCD that will display data in digital, analog, and bar graph formats. You can even monitor your battery backup with a programmable gas gauge. The non-volatile memory stores more than 100,000 data points without power. That's nearly 2.5 months worth of data at 1 point per minute. It has a USB computer interface for configuration and data download, and you can program it to sound an alarm for overcurrent, over and under voltage, and amp hours. The software that comes with it allows you to program every aspect of the Power Check operation, such as data logging rate, display formats, and alarm conditions. You can display current, voltage, wattage, and amp hours in real time. It has an integrated charting software that automatically collects and displays data. All the data can be downloaded and stored for later analysis. If this sounds like something you would really like, make sure you head on over to everythinghamradio.com/WMR and check it out. And if you do, and enter the code EHSummer at checkout, you will get $50 off of your purchase. Normally the Power Check runs $184.95. If you enter the coupon code EHSummer, you get a $50 discount, and that comes to $134.95. You can't beat it. The offer expires September 30th, 2017, so make sure you head on over and get yours before the coupon expires. Also, don't forget to pick up your free USB port monitor with your purchase. Again, that's everythinghamradio.com/WMR for more information. All right, y'all, we are back with Ria Jairam, N2RJ. I'm guessing that is a vanity call sign. Am I right?
Yeah, it's a vanity. I got around 10 years ago, I would say, when everybody was upgrading to extra. I actually, it's interesting. My first call sign, my first ever license was an extra in the U.S. because I went in to take the test, and then I kept passing element after element, and then they said, "Why don't you take the extra?" I said, "No, I'm tired. I want to go home." And then they said, "No, it's taken." I'm like, "All right, I took it." And then they took it, and they said, "Congratulations, you're an extra." I'm like, "Wow." So, yeah, that was cool though. But in all fairness, I had my license from before, from Trinidad, and the theory is the same. We use the British exam, so I also have a British license too.
Wow, cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. So let's get into software-defined radios and their uses in amateur radio. What are some of the uses that there is in the actual amateur radio hobby?
So, I'll tell you, the biggest use people see basically is visibility of a lot of spectrum. So normally with a conventional super heterodyne receiver, the passband is what you hear on the speakers, right, or your headphones.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have an IF with a limited range as well. But, you're not really seeing a lot of spectrum. With some of these radios, you can see, as much as 14 megahertz of spectrum at one time. That's a lot.
Wow.
I'm sure you would agree.
Yeah.
So you can basically jump on a band and see where it's busy and see where it's not busy. You can work a DX. You can see where the pileup is concentrated and where there's a little hole where you can get in and then call, and then the guy can hear you without the QRM. And the other thing you can do is you can run a multi-channel decoder such as CW Skimmer, which basically would decode all of the CW signals on the band and present them, on a screen, so you can see if there's any DX that's operating, or if you're working a contest, if there's any needed multipliers that you want, so it's very powerful. I mean, it's gotten to the point where the big gun contest stations have like a farm of software-defined radios. I believe K3LR uses like a whole rack of CW skimmers, and he just feeds it into all his operators, and they would get all the cluster spots from CW Skimmer. And it's good because, for one, you get the signal as soon as it's received, right? With a regular DX cluster, you're depending on somebody to hear the signal, decode it, and then they would work it first, of course, and then they would put it on a cluster. With CW Skimmer, your computer hears it and then puts it on. So, I would say that is the main advantage. There are many others, though. The performance is just out of this world. I mean, I wouldn't say super heterodyne is dead, but, there's some who say that, right? Super heterodyne is still very good. I know the Elecraft K3S is a very good transceiver, but it's mainly super het technology. I think, though, you're seeing the point where mainstream manufacturers such as ICOM are now embracing the SDR technology with the ICOM 7300, and it's not just a niche market anymore. So, everybody is realizing that, hey, this could provide benefits, and the economy of scale in terms of the actual hardware is at the point where you can put this technology in a $1,000 radio and, and make a profit, basically.
Huh. So let me make sure I'm understanding this right now. Now, are you saying that you have your computer screen and your software-defined radio hooked up to, and it shows you basically anywhere in this 13 megahertz band where there's something going on, and you click on where there's something going on, and you'll be able to hear that frequency? Am I understanding that right?
Yeah, sort of. Now, normally we don't view 13 megahertz of spectrum. What we do is, for example, on the flex radios, you can have up to, depends on the model. I use the 6700. I can have up to 8 pan adapters, basically 8 waterfalls and the spectrum display, 8 bands open at the same time.
Wow.
And I can see what's going on 8 bands visually. So I can see whether a band is busy or not. I can see, and then I can see if a part of that band is crowded and if part of it is not. Like, for example, if you want to get on call CQ, I can look on the band and see where, it's full of signals where I might QRM them, and then I see a spot. Like right now I'm looking at 40 meters, right? I see like around 7170 to about 7190, is not really, and I'm beaming southwest right now, is not really, doesn't have much opportunity, but above 7200, like between 7240 to about 7260 has a lot of space. So if I want to get on call CQ, I could do that now for 13 colonies, maybe. So because I worked that event too. Really,
and we actually had the last the episode before last was on the 13 colonies, it was the I talked with the president of the WM3PEN bonus station, Bob. Greenberg, maybe? No, not Bob Greenberg.
Yeah.
Yeah, is it? Okay, yeah. I spoke with him about it, and I'm wanting so bad to jump on my radio right now while I'm sitting here in my shack and try and get one of these 13 colonies things, but I only have 20 meters, and I'm not seeing a whole lot on DX Summit right now in 20 meters, and
Yeah.
so,
WA3PZO, I believe that's Bob Josewit, right?
that's not who I talked to. No.
Oh, okay. Well, he's one of the people involved too. Yeah.
So now, back to my question now. Okay, so you see where there's activity, you click on it. Now, does it come out through your speakers on your computer? What's actually going on there, or do you actually have to go to your regular radio, tuned to that frequency to hear it and transmit on it?
So with any software-defined radio, even like the Anon radios where you're using Power SDR, right? So by the way, Power SDR was originally a Flex Radio product that they released open source, and it's not really a Flex product anymore. It's being developed by third parties, open source. Anyway, you go on, so you see like the signal, and then Flex has what you call slices, which are basically receivers, right? So you could drag your slice over to somewhere like, like right now I'm dragging mine to like 7227 or 7227 around there, right? Or, you know what? Hams like knobs. I can use a knob. I have a Flex control knob. I can use a knob and tune, and it'll visually just slide across my screen, and I can just drop it anywhere. I can add another receiver in here, which is basically just a piece of software, something in memory in the radio. This comes up. I can add up to 8 if I wanted to, which gets to the point of a little ridiculous, but you can do it,
So now how do you go about talking on it then? Do you talk through your SDR radio, or do you talk through your regular HF radio then?
So with this one, you actually talk through the radio. There are some SDRs that are basically just receivers, but a lot of the modern ones, like the Flex Signature series and the Anon 100D, 200D, 8000 DLE, and there's another one, the Sun SDR MB1, and of course the ICOM 7300 and upcoming 7610. They're all fully featured transceivers, meaning that you could put these things on your desk. In the case of the Flex, you use either a Maestro, which will give you the knobs and the switches that you're accustomed to. In the case of the Anon, you can buy a little console called PyHP SDR, or you could use your computer. And the others have built-in, knobs. The ICOM looks just like a regular radio. So you get in, you plug in your microphone, your set of paddles, and you just talk like a regular radio.
Huh. Then that's pretty cool. So you've mentioned these quite a few times already, the Flex and the Anon and stuff like that. Let's talk a little bit about that. What are some of the good radios? Or first off, let's start with what are the best starter SDR radios in your opinion?
Well, I would like to say one size really doesn't fit all. I think that ICOM did a really good thing by bringing the price point of the ICOM 7300 down to, basically less than $1,500. So if you're on a budget, you can get one of those, and I think those will work very well. It's a very good receiver, and it provides a familiar radio experience. Flex just released its new line of Signature Series SDRs. The all-in-one starts, the 6400M starts around $3,000, but you can get a regular 6400 for $2,000, which is, which gives you as good performance as you will get in software-defined radios today. And I think that's an unbelievable price point. Anon also has theirs competitively priced too. So, there's really not an easy way to choose. The only thing I would say is that with each of these radios, they're slightly different in how they implement SDR. So Flex Signature Series, for example, is what you call a thin client radio, where they would do all the processing inside of the radio. So the radio itself has an embedded computer built in, and it would then digitize those signals and then process them, and then it would send those digital bit streams over the network. to either a computer, a Maestro, which is their control console, or an iPhone and an iPad. And with version 2.0, which is coming out, there's a feature where you can basically connect your radio over the internet from the Maestro, another computer, or the iPhone or iPad, and operate your radio at home from anywhere in the world. Turnkey.
Wow.
And the thing about the thin client is that since the processing is done in the radio, a lot of data doesn't have to traverse the network. So even though there's gigabit Ethernet on the radio, there is no real reason to saturate that bandwidth. The Anon, on the other hand, it does things a little different. Like I said, it was an open source project. They are what you call a thick client, where they send a lot of data to the computer to process, and the computer runs the PowerSDR software, PowerSDR MRX, and that does your processing. You can still operate remote, but I think you have to do things a little differently. I don't own one, admittedly, so I don't know. The ICOM is a bit different in that ICOM behaves just like any of their other radios, in that it's a single box. You can lift it up with a handle and just carry it, pop it down, plug it in, and go. So that's what you want. You can get that, and I've used one, Emmett, from Radio Waves, set up a special event station, Hamcom in Texas, where I was a few weeks ago, and I used his, and it was a pretty nice experience. First time I really used one of those radios. So yeah, so I mean that's what it comes down to. There are different technologies, different ways to implement SDR, and that's what your choice will boil down to. If you want something of a completely traditional radio experience, you can go at a low cost. You can go with the ICOM. If you want something a little more, how should I put it? A little more cutting edge, you could go with the Flex. If you want something where you can run different types of client software, because you're not just tied with PowerSDR on the Anon, by the way, you can run different client software. I believe so. You can run, I believe, CUSDR and other software they have. You get that, and it'll just send a raw bit stream to the computer, and then you can run your different software. So that's basically how it is, and that's how you'll base your decisions.
Now, is there an SDR? I don't know, like an SDR dongle or something like that I can get if I just want to listen to it, kind of like really basic entry level type thing where I'm only going to drop, $100 or something like that?
So this is the interesting thing. Years ago when I first heard about SDR, the person who did the presentation said, what can I get for $1? And he said, nothing. What can you get for 10? And then he pulled out this little thing called a soft rock. I built like 10 of these kits. And they're basically little tiny SDRs. Actually, not SDRs, SDR front ends that plug into your computer. Today, you really don't have to go that far. Today, you can get the RTL SDR devices. Amazon has them, or other places online will have them. You have to find out which one is compatible, though. And with that and appropriate front end, you can get a very cheap SDR. So basically, the RTL SDR was designed as a TV tuner dongle in Europe, but somebody found out that it works well as a software-defined radio. The only problem is that it uses, I think it's tuned for VHF and above, so there had to be a front end for HF operation. Yeah, and I think those are less than $100.
Cool. Now, I've heard from my good buddy Cale over at Ham Radio 360, one of his show sponsors is AirSpy, and they do software-defined radios. Do you know anything about those?
No, I mean, I've heard of them, really. They're like an open source thing. I mean, there are a lot of people who, like I said, the economy of scale has gotten to the point where SDR technology is pretty cheap now. So, I believe AirSpy might be based on RTL, if I'm not mistaken. So it's probably, same thing, except that this is really packaged up for amateur radio specifically, or not the original RTL application, which was basically a TV tuner, right? So this is probably specifically designed as an SDR using the RTL chipset. I don't know. I've never owned one, but that's my take on it.
Okay. That is good. So, what other uses do you see other than with amateur radio with an SDR?
Okay, so as far as one more use with amateur radio, contest organizers have basically been recording the entire band, every single band, during contests to detect cheating. So, if people cheat on contests, they can replay that whole section of the contest to see where people are. In terms of software-defined radio, I believe a lot of other applications are already using it, like, military use it for intelligence gathering. I believe it might be used in cellular and other, commercial radio applications. I'm not 100% sure, but that it does. It's at that point where it could be used for that kind of thing. And like I said, the TV tuner was basically an SDR, so But I think it would have the most utility in some application where an entity needs to decode a huge swath of spectrum and then process it offline, or even process in real time.
I guess this maybe could be the next evolution of the scanner, too.
You know what? That would probably not be a bad idea. My Flex 6700 actually comes with VHF receive capability. I can go from 137, I think, to like 150 meg or something like that. Basically, it retunes. Simplistically, it retunes the ADC to operate at VHF. So, yeah, and I can basically view that whole swath of VHF spectrum.
So, are most SDRs more along on the HF side of things, or can you go all the way down to like 1.2 gigahertz or something like that?
Yes and no. So most SDRs are indeed HF, most amateur radio SDRs, simply because to get anything higher than HF, you either need to get anything higher than HF as a direct sampling SDR, where basically, like I mentioned, you just digitize the signal from the antenna. You need to have a very expensive hardware, and that expensive hardware would run at a very high sampling rate and would also produce a lot of data. So it's just not practical to do that. So most people who use VHF and who use SDRs, they use transverters. The Flex 6700, I think, is really the only commercially available SDR that has a VHF capability built in, and even so, it's just 2 meters. So, people, if they operate microwaves or anything higher than 2 meters, they need a transverter, and the IF is usually in the 10-meter band, or the 2-meter band, too.
Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and take another quick break here, and when we come back, let's talk a little bit about some of the equipment that you need other than just the computer and the SDR. So stick around, and we'll be right back, and we'll continue our talk with Ria.
Hi, this is Dan, KB6NU, author of the No Nonsense Amateur Radio License Study Guides. My study guides have helped thousands get their license or upgrade to general class or extra class, and they can help you too. What makes them unique is my no-nonsense style. I don't bamboozle you with a lot of text. Instead, I give you just what you need to know in a simple, straightforward way that's designed to help you pass the test. One reader even told me, your study guide explained in a couple of paragraphs topics that the license manual needed a couple of pages to cover. Another wrote, the clarity and simplicity of your descriptions blew the license manual away. My study guides are available in paperback, in a variety of ebook formats, and even as audiobooks. Get your copy today. Go to kb6nu.com/ETHR for more info. Thanks.
All right, we are back with Ria Jairam, N2RJ, and we are continuing our discussion about software-defined radios. And this time, I think let's talk about some of the equipment. I know that's kind of counterintuitive, I guess you could say, maybe of a, quote, software-defined radio, but I'm sure there's other things you need than just a computer and the actual software-defined radio. What kind of other stuff? I mean, do you need like a special antenna? Do you need like low loss coax or anything like that? What kind of stuff like that do you need?
Well, it's interesting because first of all, you mentioned the computer. I would say with the anon radios, you definitely need a powerful computer. With the flex radios, not so much. But anyway, that's just an aside. Of course, the ICOM, you don't really need any. Now, as far as other equipment goes, so because I mentioned you can view so much spectrum, I might be the worst person to tell you what kind of antenna to have for an SDR because I have a stepper. But typically what you want are antennas that can receive over a broad frequency range if you want to be able to view, multiple bands at once. So if you have like a regular trap tri-bander, or you have, like a Force 12 C31XR or something like that, or even like a, Mosley or JK antennas, or I'm talking big antennas probably, or even if you have like a wire dipole or, but truth be told, any antenna up there will be able to allow you to receive on multiple bands. As far as coax goes, that isn't really dependent on the radio because on HF it really doesn't make much of a difference. Where you're going to have much of a difference with coax is on VHF and above. So if you operate VHF and above, you're going to need lower loss coax. But that's true for any radio. The way I would see it with with some of these radios is you're not really going to change much in your shack. However, you do have to get accustomed with, for example, how you control external devices. Because if you have like an amplifier that needs like a cat control, you're not going to have just like, some of these radios don't really have like one serial port out where it would deliver like a stream of the frequency data. With the flex radios, you need a FTDI dongle, and this is a recent feature they added. Previously, you had to use a utility on your computer called DDUtil and connect your serial cable to the computer. But now you can connect it with a serial port dongle. I have a stepper connected. I had my other amplifier connected before I sold the amplifier. And interestingly enough, the new amplifier I'm getting, which is the Power Genius XL, is going to connect via Ethernet. So I just plug that on my home network and away I go. So, other than that, the goal with most SDR manufacturers these days is to make it as close to the authentic radio experience that everybody's accustomed to. Because you know what? Tim Duffy said at HamCom, hams like knobs. And, if you take away that from them, they're not going to buy a radio. So, you know what? He's right. Mm-hmm. I would not dispute that from him. Which is why Flex went with the new radios that have the knobs now.
So it's probably not a good idea for me to put a 5/8 wave mag mount dual band, VHF UHF antenna if I'm going to try and receive something on 80 meters or something like that.
That goes true for any radio. But you know what? Actually, if you want to receive both bands, you're probably going to need something a little more broadbanded. I'll also mention something too. A lot of these radios, they have like separate receive antenna ports where, you can put in dedicated receive antennas such as beverages and K9AY loop and all that stuff for low band receive. Because I do a lot of low bands. I use beverages. You'll find me on 160 trying to get that rare DX, and you have to hear them to work them.
Okay, so I'm assuming you're not talking about drinks here. What is a beverage?
A beverage basically is a very long wire that it's about at least 3/4 wavelengths long. It could go as much as 2 wavelengths, I believe. And you can have either a beverage above ground, like 12 feet above ground, or just to clear the deer, or you can have one on the ground.
Clear the deer.
Yes.
So, I guess maybe that's kind of like a kind of the same type thing with Nibis. I guess maybe with that kind of long wire low to the ground type thing.
What do you call it?
The Nibis, the near vertical. Oh,
no. The Envis.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are different. Beverages are only for receive. So this brings me to another important point. The main advantage of an SDR is the receiver. However, there are features you can take advantage of on transmit as well, such as, if you operate ESSB, you can do more bandwidth easily, and you can apply all sorts of filters and equalization. So that's the other thing too. You might not need so much external audio gear because a lot of it's in software and a lot of it's digital. But some people like that. They like the external racks of processing, and they want a studio with their equipment, right?
So what is ESSB? Extended single sideband, maybe?
Basically, it's SSB that's I think like at least 4 to 5, 6 kilohertz wide. Its emphasis is on audio quality rather than bandwidth efficiency. If there's room in the band and people want to operate that way, they would just widen it out a little bit. And previously you had to modify transceivers to do it. Now with these software-defined radios, the software just allows you to create a wide signal.
I'm just learning so much more than just software-defined radio here, y'all. I'm learning all about HF and different types of antennas and all that too. I hope you are learning as much as I am. So let's talk a little bit about the pros and cons versus SDRs versus standard hardware. What do you call it?
It's called super heterodyne.
Yeah, them things.
Yeah, superhet. Okay, so yes, there are some disadvantages. The disadvantage number one is that for a lot of SDRs, you used to need a computer. I say used to because they wised up now, and they, like Tim said, hams like knobs. And then a lot of radios are coming as all-in-one. Like you have the Sun SDR MB1, which is coming as an all-in-one. You have the Flex 6400 and 6600M, 6400M and 6400M coming as all-in-ones. You have ICOM with the 7300 and 7610s all-in-one. But if you have, like me, you have a Flex 6700, you need to have a computer, or you need to have a Maestro, or you need to have an iPad. So that's one. The other thing is that the front-end components tend to be expensive. So even though there's protection circuitry in there, I would not want to inadvertently put more RF into the front end than necessary. So if you have a fancy switching arrangement in your shack, just be sure you don't switch into your transceiver because you could blow up some really expensive. Let's see what else. Well, these, the radios themselves, they're ICOM pretty much blew that up with the 7300, but SDR hardware is not used to be not cheap, but that's changing now. The other thing is if you have one of these computer-based SDRs, you should at least know how to hook up Ethernet, and they work best when they're connected to your network. So if you're not familiar with networking, and believe me, I won Top Elmer Award on the Flex Radio forums for a reason, because I'm like a networking guru. I deal with computer networking on a daily basis, and a lot of questions I get from people both on and off the forum are, how do I do this with my radio on the network? So, oh yes, and the final disadvantage I would say is that if you operate some of these radios, your view of how you operate a radio is going to have to change. It took me a solid week with the Flex 6700 before I could get it running the way I wanted to, because prior to that I was ICOM. And then I ran ICOM, and I could just turn on the radio, twiddle the knobs, and then get on the air and yak all day, right? With this now, I have to start up software, I have to learn about slices, I have to learn how to create a slice, I have to learn how to do the active transmit slice, and a zillion other things. So
would you say there is some kind of a steep learning curve, maybe?
There is, because remember, you're dealing with the ability to have as much as 8 receivers. I think Anon allows you like 7 receivers in Power SDR. The Flex 6700 allows you 8. And the others allow you like 2 and 4 receivers. So, you have to understand how those operate. So, obviously for me, I'm probably a little, I wouldn't say biased, but I'm probably a little won over by the whole technology bit because I think the benefits are tremendous. Seeing your spectrum is a totally different experience from tuning around. Because, prior to that, you turn around and say, is the frequency in use? The frequency in use? Yes, the frequency is in use. Please QSY. In a heavy Italian accent or something. And then this one I can see, oh, here's a nice clear frequency. Let me go there. Is the frequency in use? Dead air. Okay. And I call, in 5 minutes I get a pileup. So I'm good.
Really cool.
Yeah.
I can totally see the advantages of using one of these, seeing the whole spectrum or something like that, on things like field day and contesting and stuff like that. I could totally see it. It's amazing. I would love to be able to actually sit down and look at it myself. Maybe one of these days I will, but I'm sure there's probably YouTube videos out there, people doing it and stuff like that. But it's just not the same without actually sitting down and using it. And I wish I would have been able to go to HamCom this year and check that out in person. But.
Well, you know what? Let me make a deal with you.
Okay.
Flex is going to release 2.0 software, right?
Uh-huh.
Now, I would let you operate my radio today, but I can't because I'm an alpha tester, and I have to give you access to the alpha version. What I will do is when they release the software, which should be soon within a week or two, I'll give you access to my radio via SmartLink over the internet, and you can give it a whirl, and we could probably go on Skype, and, you can tell me how you like it, and then, you can see the experience for yourself, basically.
I might just have to take you up on that.
Yes. So just send me a reminder, and we'll get it squared away.
Cool.
Yeah.
So before we go, is there anything else that we've forgotten?
Well, I mean, there is the whole remote operation aspect of it, which I did touch on briefly, but prior to because Flex is releasing their remote operation software 2.0, which is SmartLink, soon. The others have their own thing. I believe Sun SDR has their own. ICOM has the RSBA1. I don't know how that operates, but, so that's getting pretty big right now, where people can sit on the internet and operate any radio they want anywhere, that, of course, with the owner's permission. And this only became possible when you began connecting radios to the network. So, I think that's the next big thing. And I think that's really going to change a lot of people's lives because, Tim himself said that, everybody's moving into these, age-restricted communities now as the ham population gets a little older. So, they have to find a way to operate, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, they still want to make contacts.
Adapt or die, pretty much.
Yep.
So, where can listeners get a hold of you at, or find you at online if they have any questions, if you don't mind?
Sure. You can look me up on QRZ.com. You can see my contact info. You can see my bio. You can see how many awesome DX I've worked over the years. I'm up to like 320 DXCC now.
Wow.
And you can send me an email. I'm also on social media. I tend to friend hams on Facebook. Ria Jairam is my Facebook ID. Because I like, the ham community. I like to give back to the ham community because hams have done so much to me. Actually, how I got started in, basically with job opportunities and stuff like that was I networked through hams and, eventually I got something, pretty good. And then, so I like to give back to the ham community. And I'm also on the Flex Radio forum, but, that's more questions specific to Flex Radio. If you just want to message me privately on Facebook or, or make a post or, comment on something or see something cool I'm doing, I post mostly about radio, but sometimes I post a few pictures of interesting things that I see. Solar eclipse is coming up. I might post something about that. So, hey, that's how you reach me.
All right. Well, Ria, thank you very much for coming on and telling us all about this software-defined radios and so much more. I've learned so much on this thing, and I'm still kind of murky on the whole situation, but I'm definitely not totally in the mud. I can actually see the light now. So
Yes.
thank you again for coming on. I greatly appreciate it, and we will talk at you later, maybe on the Ham Radio Elmer's forum where I found you at.
Not a problem. Listen, anytime. Reach out anytime if you have any questions. If you want to bring me back, feel free.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I might have you on for. I got a couple other ideas I might have that you've kind of touched on a little bit, so maybe we'll get together a little bit and maybe have you back on again. And maybe I'll talk to you on the air. Maybe I can make contact with you on the 13 event colonies. Oh, by the way, it was Bob Joseph White that I spoke
Joseph
with.
White.
Yeah, that's who I talked to.
That's the same one. Yeah, I knew him. He was a CQ editor for public service.
Yeah.
And that's how I know him. So
Yeah.
he's a good guy.
Yeah, he was really, really awesome, and I thank him so much for doing it.
Yeah.
So, all right, well, I guess have a great evening in 73, Team Man.
73 and 88, and take care and work you on the air and work me as Kilo 2 India.
All right, have a great
All
one.
right. All right, bye.
Bye. All right, y'all. So that pretty much wraps up this episode. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you again, Ria, for coming on and talking to us about Software Defined Radios. I hope that you had a awesome 4th of July, and I hope that you had some luck of making some contacts on the 13 Colony special event that's been going on this week. This episode will go live on the 6th, so if you're hearing this on the day it releases, you still have time to make some contacts. The 13 Colony special event goes on until midnight, I believe, Eastern time, or 4 a.m. on the 7th UTC time. So if you're listening to this on the 6th, you still have some time to make some contacts. Check out dxsummit.fi and see if there's anybody working. All you have to do is make one contact to get the special event certificate. So I hope you had some fun with that if you participated. And thank you very much for listening. Again, you can find the show notes for today's episode at everythinghamradio.com/podcast/76. You can follow me on Facebook at facebook.com/everythinghamradio. The group is at facebook.com/groups/everythinghamradio. I'm on YouTube at youtube.com/everythinghamradio and on Twitter at K5CLM. I guess that pretty much wraps it up, y'all. I really greatly appreciate it. This is episode number 76. I can't believe it. I mean, we're 23 episodes away from 100, or 24 episodes away from 100. So I'm hoping to have something special on the 100th episode. So make sure you stick around and stay tuned for that. One more thing before we go, I do have some stuff in my swag store that you can find at everythinghamradio.com/store. I have some coffee cups, some coasters, some mouse pads, and some other information, or some other items on there that you can buy with the Everything Ham Radio podcast logo on it. It's all made by Randy, so they're awesome. They're great quality. And if you need QSL cards, make sure that you check him out over there. There will be a link in the show notes of today's episode to his website that you can get some QSL cards. And if you mention you heard about him on the Everything Ham Radio podcast, I will get a slight affiliate commission on that. So please do that if you are getting some QSL cards printed by Randy. I guess that pretty much wraps it up. Thank you all for your support. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing this. I've had some awesome growth the past few months. This last month was a record month with over 18,000 downloads. So thank you for that. Please continue to share this with your friends and help me spread the word on this. I'm flabbergasted at the amount of people that are listening and the feedback that I've been getting. So thank you very much for that. I guess that pretty much wraps it up. So I guess until next time, this is K5CLM signing out. 73, y'all.